Bruce Lipton, also from the West, also steeped in academia and science and study, but who interestingly delves, as you now know, deeply into the spiritual discussion. And as I've mentioned before this week, when I've spoken about Bruce, I've said, to me, one of the most important people in our community, because he bridges through his work and his being, he bridges science and spirit. So for a man who came from, again, this very scientific place, what's happened in your life to bring you to this seat right now?
A shock.
A shock.
When I was very young, of course you listen to older people, adults about life, and there were two different perspectives. There was the spiritual perspective of life, and there was a scientific. What was interesting as a child even, I saw that many spiritual people would talk about the glory of spirit, but then as a child I could also see, while they had nice talk, their lives didn't match what they were teaching. And so at some point I started to say that spirituality is not the path, but I saw science. And what was science unique? It was that a truth in science on this side of the planet is the same truth in science on the other side of the planet. And I started to realize that the understanding of science seemed to be more important than the belief in spirituality. And then, of course, as a kid, Albert Einstein was still alive. And as a kid, when you see Albert Einstein, he's like the most lovable grandfather image you could ever imagine, a joy-filled scientist. So I said, that's where I'm going to go. I spent the next 30, 40 years of my life in deep science. I learned everything just like out of a book. I just read it and it became, yes, that's true. And genes control life and we're just molecules and then we have life and then we die and then the genes and molecules turn back into the dust. And I thought, oh, okay, we just have this one life. And so I had no spirituality. As a matter of fact, I was very proud of my science. And then I started working on cells. And I saw something that was completely different than what was going on with my field of science. In one part of my life, I'm teaching in the medical school, and I'm teaching conventional science. Genes control life, and your fate is determined by your genes. But in my laboratory, I was working with cells, and my research revealed the genes were not controlling the behavior of the cell. The environment was controlling the behavior of the cell. But at this time, all of the scientists around me were genes, and I'm the only one that's looking at a different answer. So most of my colleagues just said, oh, your work is interesting, but it's not very important. But I kept studying the cells. The cells were my guru. They were my teacher. I observed and watched the cells. And when I started to understand how can an environment change genetics, all of a sudden I realized that the information from the environment was being controlled by the cell membrane, the skin. And that information then went into the nucleus and controlled the genes. So I started to look at the nature of the cell membrane. And I saw the mechanism of what are called receptors. Like in our membrane, our skin, we have receptors, eyes, ears, nose, taste, and how we see the environment, and that information controls our biology. In the tissue culture, I saw the same thing. The environment was coming in through receptors, and then the membrane would tell the genes what to do. Well, I was so excited by this, and I remember typing on the computer my insights and talking to the computer about, oh, this is how life is controlled. And then I realized as I was typing on the computer that what happens is no two people are the same. And I say, how do I say that biologically? How can I say no two people are the same? The answer is simple. You cannot take your cells and your organ and put it into another person's body because the immune system says self. And if you put somebody else's cells in your body, the immune system says not self. and the immune system will eliminate it. So I said, wow, no two people are the same. Where's the difference? And then I realized on the surface of our cells, there are special receptors, antennas. And no two people have the same set of antennas. I say, yeah, but what are the receptors reading? I say, they're reading environmental signal. I said, then no two people are reading the exact same environmental signal. And I started to realize, but wait, our identity are these antennas. And so science says, oh, the identity is physical antennas. And I go, no. The antennas receive a signal. I said, you're focusing on the mechanical receptor. You're not focusing on where the signal is coming from. And then in this moment of blinding flash, I realized, oh my goodness, all of us are each receiving a special environmental signal. But the most important and exciting part was our identity coming through the receptors is not in here. Our identity is coming in from outside. And all of a sudden I said, but if my identity is on the outside, then my body is not the identity. It's picking up a signal. And in physics, we call it the field. And I say, oh, each of us is recording our own environmental field. But then a life transformation in 1 minute. I was not spiritual 40 some years, and in 1 minute, I became fully spiritual. How? Because I realized we're not in here. We are playing our spirit through this. So I refer to it like the body is a television set. And my television set is playing the Bruce show for you. And I say, but where does the Bruce show come from? I say, it's the broadcast. And I say, oh. And at that instant, I realize if you're watching a television and the television breaks, we say, television is dead. I go, is the broadcast still there? I say, yes, the broadcast is there. You get another TV, you plug it in and turn it on, and the show is back on. And all of a sudden I said, I cannot die. I cannot die because I'm the television set. The broadcast is forever. And I started to realize, my goodness, because if my body dies, a new TV in the future from another parent will show up with the same antennas but a different body. It doesn't have to be male or female. It could be white, black, yellow, red. These are television sets. We are the broadcast. And I realized at that moment, I cannot die because I'm not in here. And at that moment, I have to tell you the truth. 40 years, my work was coming from my head, my brain. And in that 1 minute, when I saw, oh my God, I'm out here, I'm a field, I'm an energy, I'm a spirit. All of a sudden, my heart started to ache, not with pain. My heart started to ache with the most overriding joy I've ever experienced in my life. The tears were coming down my face, and it was like, and my whole life changed. Why? Because if you eliminate the concept of death, there is nothing to fear on this planet. And I lost the fear of death. And I also started to recognize, oh my God, I am this energy. And then my science brain said, why have a spirit and a body? Why not just be the spirit? And that's when I found out I had Jewish cells. How did I know? Because I asked a question. Why have both? And 50 trillion funny cells come up with a question they asked me. I asked them a question. The cells asked me a question. The cell said, Bruce, if you're just a spirit, what does chocolate taste like? And then I realized the body is an extension of the spirit. The body gives us an opportunity to experience life. What does a sunset look like? What does music sound like? What does wonderful food taste like? And I said, that's from the body. And that body sends that information back to my spirit. But then I also recognize, but my spirit is driving my body and creating. And then I started to laugh because I said, everyone thinks we die and we go to heaven where you can create whatever heaven is for you. And I realized, oh my God, we are born into heaven. This is where you came to create. And the problem is that why can't our creations always match our wishes and our desires? Because between our spirit and our body is a mind. And that mind gets programmed by teachers. And if the teachers don't give you the absolute truth, your body is not running from truth, it is running from program. And I started to realize, oh my goodness, all my biology friends were talking about genes, and all of a sudden I walk in and say, spirit. And they looked at me like, what, are you crazy? So I walked out of the university. I said, I cannot go back into that classroom and tell people they are victims of their genes, because we are not victims, we are masters. The only problem is if you don't have a good program, what you create is not beautiful. What you create is disease, problems, war. I go, this is from other people's beliefs. When you get your own belief and you let go of the program, you start to walk with spirit. And when I started to walk with spirit, I walked to Rishikesh.